Spider-Man? More like Glider-Man. Marvel Spider-Man 2 is a direct sequel to 2018's Marvel Spider-Man and the Miles Morales game, but does it live up to the hype? Is it a worthy successor to the previous two games that came before it? I think yes, and this is probably the most quintessential Spider-Man game that we have on the market so far. However, it comes with a lot of caveats, and it also comes with some of the most frustrating decisions to ever be made in a Spider-Man game. So let's discuss what makes this game so good, and also where Insomniac dropped the ball. Set 10 months after the Miles Morales game, we see both Peter and Miles adapting and balancing their personal lives with responsibilities of being Spider-Man, as well as also just adjusting to the fact that there are now two Spider-Men. We see a much more cohesive synergy between the two, often working together to stop crimes, workshopping plans, and Pete continuing his mentorship to guide Miles into the best Spider-Man that he can be. This is until Sandman is seen leveling the city blocks and going on an absolute rampage. Now this opening not only brings the players up to speed with the basic controls of the games, but it also sets a very high standard as to what should follow for the rest of the game. The sheer scale and visual effects and technical know-how on display here is really a true testament to Insomniac's skills. Now we do later find out that Sandman went on a rampage as he was protecting his daughter and felt like no one was listening to him, that he was being watched or hunted by one of the game's main antagonists, Kraven. Now the game does try to humanize or even get the players to empathize with Kraven as he is on his last or final hunt. We later learn that Kraven's body is betraying him, so he, along with his extremely well-resourced army of hunters and military-grade tech, decide to come to America to try to find an equal, someone worthy to taste his final breath. Now Kraven is a big boy, and all this talk about wanting someone to taste his last breath and choke him out, I can't help but feel like there was a bit more of a kink toward what he wanted.
Hey yo, what the fuck?
Now while that's all going on, we also have a story where Peter and MJ can't really get on the same page about moving in with each other. Peter also becomes a teacher, which is extremely short-lived.
You're fired.
Miles is struggling in balancing his responsibilities of Spider-Man as well as keeping his education moving forward, often seeing his friends progress while he gives off the feeling of being stuck. And on top of that, we have Connors being turned back into the Lizard thanks to Kraven, as well as a true introduction to Harry Osborn, who has been in the vat with the symbiote, which has basically been curing him, but as we know, the symbiote has other plans. Now the story in this game, albeit a little short, is pretty good to fantastic in my eyes, but it's not without issue. Most characters are shown to have very relatable motivations, which is something the player can quickly grasp onto and begin to empathize with each character. There is a clear link that ties Kraven into New York and his influence and terror that spreads throughout the city as he hunts down characters one by one, even causing some characters just to get the hell out of the city completely. Venom, again, only in this game for a short time, still has a massive presence when he's on screen in an almost tension-filled horror element. When he is on screen, he absolutely owns it, and part of that is due to Tony Todd's amazing voice work. There's also a lot of really human moments in the game that lets players slow down and truly absorb the smaller, seemingly inconsequential moments that allow for this game to nail the feeling that this is just simply more than you dressing up as a hero and just punching people. It captures very real emotions through its smaller instances, which only complement and enhance your attachments to the characters to provide those larger emotional impacts in those bigger moments. A few examples are just hanging out with a group of friends at a carnival or having flashbacks to cement your friendship with Harry, seeing the apprehension of MJ wanting to move in with Peter, almost like something is stopping her, which is paid off brilliantly at the end of the game. Hell, even just sitting there and listening to people tell their stories or allowing an old friend to say his final goodbye.
I need your help, Spider-Man. I'm finally going on an adventure, but I want to set my birds free first. Let them see the world outside this city.
They are pigeons.
Can you take them up north for me? Somewhere peaceful?
Oh, I don't know. Howard, this is your family.
It's their time.
Okay, this is it. Your new home. Pidgey, you're in charge. Okay, I'm exhausted. I'll hitch the train back. Better go check on Howard. He must be missing them already. Oh no. Howard?
Oh, hey, Spider-Man.
Hey, sorry. Friend of mine.
Take all the time you need. If it helps, it looked like he was at peace.
He was. He's finally on that adventure with his wife.
This is what truly made the game special to me, that sense of community and true attention to detail, and its ability to capture such raw emotions on many different scales. It's very real world problems and issues that almost every player could immediately empathize with. On the other side of the coin, the game can masterfully manipulate you into feeling a wide array of emotions just through its set pieces and storytelling. You can get a real sense of joy, dread, fear, sadness, relief just from going through the story, even connecting with characters that were once perceived to be one-dimensional. However, with that being said, the story isn't perfect, and I'm sure you've heard by now that the main story can be completed in anywhere from 15 to 17 hours with a full 100% clearance rate easily achievable at that 30-hour mark. With that in mind and with everything going on in the story, I found there to be some pacing issues, especially toward the second half of the game. Now from memory, there are only about 3 to 4 missions that Peter had the black suit on for, or a couple of hours max. It's then given back to Harry, who becomes Venom, and that whole saga finishes itself off in just another few hours. It was wild that we got the black suit, Peter's attitude changed, he and Miles had a fight, we got rid of the suit, Venom comes out, and then is defeated all within the space of a few hours. We lose the symbiote abilities, but we do get the anti-venom suit, which gives us those abilities back, but that's basically right at the end of the game. For the black suit being such a prominent story and event, it felt somewhat rushed to me. As I was also playing, Venom and Kraven, the two advertised antagonists for the game, felt really underdeveloped. I'll get more into the characters in a moment, but in terms of their on-screen time in the game, both of them only had about 30 to 35 minutes of cutscenes throughout the entire game. Add the time in for their respective boss battles and levels, which are only about another 10 to 15 minutes longer, give or take how long you take to finish them, and you can see that even if we're being generous, you could say that both characters have a total of 1 hour each in the game. In terms of total time, that's 2 hours for two of the main antagonists in a 15 to 17 hour long story. That is not enough. And there's no wonder why people like myself have that feeling that the characters were underdeveloped and severely underutilized. There's barely any lore on the symbiotes, and what is most known about them comes from a call from Connors while you're web swinging. Venom comes across as this big tanky monster who just wants to take over the world, and I never really bought into the synergy with Harry and the symbiote, to the point where it got me questioning, was Harry really the right choice to become Venom in the first place? Both Venom and Kraven needed to be introduced, they needed to establish their presence, they needed to outline their motivations, they needed to act on their plans, and we the player need to start seeing their consequences of those actions, and ultimately see their defeat. When the characters are given roughly an hour each to do all of that, and the rest of the heavy lifting is done through fighting their thugs, with dialogue and exposition thrown in to fill in the large gaps, it creates a massive disconnect between the antagonists, who are off screen most of the time, and toward the player. What would have been more effective is have them pop up through your play, have Venom taunt you and really delve into that side of him, even getting into more of a horror element and the feeling that he just won't let up. Same with Kraven, make us feel like he's always there, waiting, watching, have him interrupt other missions, just something other than most of their presence being reduced to cutscenes. I really wanted this story to make me feel like I was prey, especially by Kraven and Venom. Kraven is the world's greatest hunter. How can I go through this game and not feel like an immediate threat is around the corner at all times? I never really got this sense. Kraven's presence in the story, although intimidating while he's on screen, can come across as one-dimensional. It's only in the later stages of the game that you find out his whole motivation to find an equal is because his body is betraying him. Before that, his whole motivation was just wanting to find a good hunt.
There are no good men. Only good prey.
For someone named Kraven the Hunter, there sure as shit wasn't much hunting going on. His whole presence in the game was reduced to his hunters or his army doing the fighting for him. And with how many thug groups this game has, he quickly took a backseat behind much more compelling characters. He had a fantastic boss fight, but for someone that was advertised as being one of the main antagonists in the game, he was very quickly forgettable. Now, seeing Peter change his whole persona while under the influence of the black suit was an absolute highlight for me in this game, and led to some of the coldest, abrupt interactions with characters.
Why don't you pop some more pills and say what you really feel?
Hey!
The irritation, the aggression really shone through, and that is largely part to the fantastic voice acting of Yuri, who plays Peter Parker. His voice changes when he has the black suit, and the visceral screams from Peter when the suit is in pain. It's just a top-notch performance. He truly does deserve an award for what he has given us in this game. And the game also feels really organic, whereby the voices will change if you're swinging or just on the ground, or if you run into a crime and you're mid-call, you'll hang up and you'll call them back and say sorry, got interrupted once you complete that crime mission. It's a really small but intricate touches like that that make the game feel very organic and capture that human element. Now, the game does take some creative liberties with certain characters and the way that the story goes. And for the most part, I think it actually works pretty well for the world that they're trying to build in Insomniac's universe. Harry being Venom worked well enough in my mind. However, I was concerned at how they're going to try to sell us that Peter and Harry are best friends when we haven't really seen him too much before. On top of that, you have to also have him become Venom, have us fight Harry and defeat him all within a few short hours, given how short this game is. I'm happy to say that I bought into their friendship completely, and this was cleverly achieved through some well-timed flashback sequences that really gave their relationship a lot of context. Him becoming Agent Venom and then Venom, I really could have done without that. I'm not saying he was a bad Agent Venom or a bad Venom, but I just feel like if you're gonna take the liberty, it needs to add some kind of value. I didn't really get too much value from him becoming Agent Venom, other than him doing good as Agent Venom and then doing bad when the symbiote completely takes over. Venom is great in the game, but he almost feels like he was used just as a tool to get Harry into critical care by the end of the game to set up for the Green Goblin. Once Venom gets on screen, it's only a matter of a few hours before he's off again. Given the short time, I don't see any other reason that they used Harry other than his bond with Norman to push him over the line for the next game. An example of taking liberties that add value to the game is making MJ scream. I absolutely loved this. You see when she's pulled in, she is terrified, and this instantly gives the situation stakes. It could have been just anyone else who becomes Scream, but by making it MJ, it forces Peter into a really tight spot. It's also using a character we have already connected with over the previous two games. Now, he obviously needs to fight off this symbiote, but he also needs to be careful not to harm or even kill MJ, who is within. MJ was also given so much more to do in this game, and her missions are actually fun now. She went from a massive pain point in the game to an absolute highlight. Even if you have to suspend your disbelief in accepting that she can one-shot some of these big-ass dudes with stun guns, even when Miles and Peter, with all their gadgets and electricity and symbiote powers, have to take multiple hits to take them down. Make it make sense, but hey, if that's what it takes to make her missions tolerable and actually enjoyable, I'm here for it. One thing I didn't like about this though, is that you actually spend more time playing as MJ compared to what you play as Venom. You make Venom playable for the shortest amount of time, but you give us something like 3 MJ missions. I was just like, mate, what are you doing? Why are you locking us into a building? Let us cause mayhem as Venom. Let us jump around, swing around the city. Let's destroy some shit. You're letting us play as Venom, but we're not allowed to do any Venom things. It was a huge oversight. So we obviously get to the end of the game and Venom is disposed of and Harry is left in a critical state and Norman is desperate to do anything to save his son, which clearly leads into the Green Goblin storyline. If you also did some of the side missions, you'll also see that Chameleon and Carnage are on the way, possibly even Null as well, and we also have confirmation of Cindy Moon is on the way as well, who will become Silk. One thing I really wish they did was add an option to choose narrative choices. Not so much a morality system like Web of Shadows, but just an option to choose which way the narrative goes. Now, not only would this lengthen the game, but it would also make the player feel even more invested into the story as they're the ones who will be driving it, as well as providing a nice level of replayability so players can go back and make some different choices. Now, I could have sworn this was going to be a feature in the game because there are some nice wide shots where everything slows down and it's perfect for a pop-up to come up where a player decides to help one player or one character or help another. An example of this is when you're playing as Miles and he's deciding to either help Spider-Man or go after Lee. This would have been the perfect moment to give the players a choice, and depending on their choice, have the outcomes and relationships between the characters be impacted by our decisions. And again, given how short this game is, if they had that choice mechanic, it allows us to go back and do more things once we've finished our first playthrough. Once you do finish the game, there really isn't that much to do apart from any of the side missions or collectibles that you had left over. As there is no choice mechanic, so no replayability, there's no New Game Plus yet, and all of the side content can be done very quickly, there really isn't much of a reason to boot up the game again unless you just want to make a brand new save file. So overall, I think the story is good. It's compelling, you buy into most of what's going on, however it does need to be long of certain moments to hold more of an impact and for players to really understand the gravity of the situations. It's almost like the game prematurely moves on from the bigger moments just to get to the next big moment, rather than just letting the player sit with what's just happened. And the theme of balance and not taking on too much, as well as accepting that it's okay to rely on others, is also a very prominent thread that runs through the entire game, something of which the player is routinely reminded of. So much so that Peter is finally able to live a normal life as everyday Peter Parker and really focus on his relationship with MJ toward the end of the game. And MJ looks much happier with this, as Peter is finally able to prioritize her over the city, which prior to Miles was a battle that she was never going to win. I really loved how Peter is now able to finally be rewarded with a more normal, or at least a more balanced life, because this really is what he deserves after his years of being Spider-Man. However, this feeling of prematurely moving on that is so consistent throughout the game is further cemented by the gameplay loops, which we'll get into in a moment. But before we do, I just wanted to talk about a few of the characters and how I feel like they were sorely mistreated by this game. So one of the best things about any Spider-Man media is seeing who he's going to fight. We see on the tablet for the trailer of this game that there are so many villains that are expected to make their return, so I was so pumped at how many villains were going to be in this game, or so I thought. Black Cat appears for a little bit and gets the hell out of the game to move in with a girlfriend in Paris. The Prowler is advertised, but he's no longer active as the Prowler. Tombstone has also gone on the straight and narrow, so he's also out. Sandman is disposed of within the opening of the game, and the only extra Sandman content you get is when you're collecting his mind fragments. Taskmaster doesn't even show up in the game, and Kraven doesn't go after Wraith, and then worst of all, you have Vulture, Shocker, and Electro all die off screen. And this really changed my view on the game, especially when it comes to the characters. Things can often feel rushed or pushed into a direction where it doesn't quite feel ready yet. The fact that some of the biggest, most impactful and fun villains from the first game were disposed of off screen is a complete disservice to those characters and also to their fans. Now, Insomniac could have at least shown Kraven hunting different villains at intervals in the game, killing them in brutal cutscenes like the one that you see with Scorpion. Not only does this avoid off-screen deaths, which are just the worst, but it also justifies and shows us why Kraven is such a threat, why he is both respected and feared, and why he can command so many people. If you just have the main story going on and in between certain intervals you have a cutscene of Kraven hunting another character that we have fought and have struggled against as Spider-Man, and we see that he takes him out super easy, that puts him on a much higher pedestal and makes us take him seriously as a threat. The game does very little to demonstrate why he is the world's greatest hunter or why we should fear him more than his giant army. But those villains were killed off screen, and no other context was added other than being relegated to having their suits of armor on display with a shitty little voice log. And it just blows my mind that in a Spider-Man game, characters that have been introduced to the player that people have loved are not only killed off screen, but are relegated to bullshit audio logs in 2023. And I even missed an audio log because these devices are so fucking small. I just cannot believe that this was greenlit. It blows my mind and it feels like an entire mistreatment. Now, aside from that little rant, Peter, Miles, Harry, and MJ's arcs were all done in a really impressive way, adding much more depth to how each other's relationships intertwine with one another and provides a lot more complexity to their entanglements. But with that being said, let's now get into the gameplay loops, starting with its traversal. So the overall gameplay feels much better in this game. Web swinging, web wings, slingshots, all of it. It's just vastly improved over the first two games, and that's what's going to make it extremely hard to go back and play the first two games, because by comparison, they're going to feel like alpha or beta builds. There's also a lot of other options to tailor your traversal settings through swinging, aim assist, and fall damage to create an experience that feels right for you. Now, I don't actually understand the criticism that people had that the web wings took over so much that they rarely swung around as Spider-Man anymore. They felt more like Superman. I didn't have that at all. I was actually using the wings as a part of my tools or a set to get around in combination with the web swinging, the slingshots, the mid-air jumps, the web wings, all of it. I was using it all fairly equally, and I was able to tie these all together to come up with some pretty awesome combos and just getting around as quickly as I could. Everything blended seamlessly, and it only felt more amazing to swing through the city this time around because everything is so much more densely packed now with more traffic and pedestrians, as well as ray tracing on. The level of polish in this game is phenomenal and harnesses the power of the PS5, but plainly put, getting around has never been this much fun or looked this good. Now, we can't talk about traversal without talking about the additions of Brooklyn and Queens though, and they're okay. They are new areas and the map certainly feels bigger. However, the two new areas do very little to change the flow of gameplay outside of some visual building changes and having some areas that look more suburban. You still have the same set of missions, the same thugs, collectibles, and things to do in the new areas compared to the old areas from the previous map. So any physical changes that impact swinging, such as only having smaller houses, are quickly negated by the use of a slingshot and wings that allowed you to glide over and traverse these new areas. So any change or challenge with the new topography is quickly rendered obsolete. Now, moving into the combat. Much like traversal, the combat has also been improved in this game, but probably not to such a degree. Attacks and gadgets are now locked to the L1 and R1 button, and selecting either triangle, square, circle, or X while you're holding down L1 or R1 will use that respective move. Miles has a mix of his gadgets and also venom powers, while Peter will have a mix of gadgets and webbing powers, or gadgets and his symbiote powers depending on where you are in the game. There is also kind of a rage meter that fills up, and once this does fill up, you'll get either a short amount of time with increased strength if you, let's say, have a symbiote, which feels amazing, or you'll get some massive large burst if you're playing as Miles. There is a new addition to the combat system with the use of a parry system as well, and I've heard that some people complain about this. However, I've actually really enjoyed this a lot in my play. When the circle around the character turns yellow, the only way to really avoid this is with a well-timed parry. You can't dodge out of the way like normal attacks, and this simple change forces players to really focus on the colors of the attacks coming in, and overall made me so much more engaged in the combat. Everything I was doing was far more deliberate, rather than just kind of being on autopilot like I was for the first two games. Parrying mixed with the new abilities, gadgets, and also the ability to make your own web ziplines for the stealth sequences gave every single scenario of taking out thugs the most fun possible. It was also a joy to go into a room or an area and assess what's the best way I could clear out the room, or just giving me the choice to either go in and do it in a stealth way or go in guns blazing. However, sadly, there still is no wall combat as seen in Web of Shadows. Now, I get for most of the enemies in this game who can't stick to walls, the wall combat wouldn't really make sense, but in this game we have symbiotes who can stick to walls. So I don't know why they didn't add wall combat in, and also the lizard in his boss battle sticks to a wall as well. So I feel like that is also yet another oversight. Peter and Miles have their own skill trees and also have a shared skill tree which easily grows over your time of playing, so there's really no need to grind for this at all. They give you many different options and buffs to take out numerous thugs that you'll encounter, and the boss battles in this game, though there are very few, are actually really well done. This game is more difficult than the first two for sure, but it doesn't feel unfair. I did get my ass handed to me on many times, but this just made me sort of sit up and pay attention, utilize well-timed attacks, parry at the right time, strategize my gadget uses, and look for things in the environment. It forces the player to pay attention, which is the best thing you want in a boss battle. Your focus meter can only be used to refill your health once it's full as well, rather than just using whatever is in the tank from the previous games, which also adds another level of difficulty and making you assess everything that you have going on, deciding if you should use your focus meter for a larger finisher or to replenish your health. It's a great risk or reward system. Now, with the combat and taking out thugs, let's talk about these thugs. This game has a thug problem, and I think this is yet another weakness to this game. Now, when I say thug problem, what I mean is it overly relies on thugs to pad out the gameplay. You have normal thugs that do regular crime. When Kraven comes in, you start getting hunters that commit crimes, but they're like thugs, but have big knives and wear fur jackets. Once the symbiote story starts, you get different colored symbiote thugs. When collecting Sandman mind fragments, you get Sandman thugs. When you're doing Mysterio's time trials, you get Mysterio thugs. When you do the flame side missions, you get cultist thugs. You see what I'm saying? Most enemies in this game have some kind of army or thug that is designed in their kind of image. And I was actually so surprised that the lizard didn't get lizard type thugs, given that everyone else in this game has thugs. Now, toward the end of my 30-ish hours of gameplay, it became so monotonous to be told that, hey, a big villain is doing something bad in the city, and the only way that I can defeat that mission is by taking out X amount of thugs, or constantly going through waves of thugs before I get to that boss. Oh no, Kraven's hunting, quick, kill 15 of his thugs. Venom's taking over the city, quick, take out 10 RGB themed symbiotes. It just felt like a giant disconnect from what was actually going on in the event of the story versus what you actually are doing to respond to that. And the game overly relies on the thugs or these faceless, nameless enemies that pad out the gameplay. I would have loved to see them step away from these thugs and put more time into your interactions with the bosses. Just something else. They do try to spice this up a little bit by changing the enemy types and variety and making them look different. But look, a brute is a brute. Whether it's a giant symbiote brute or it's a hunter brute with a bear hat on or something like that, they all play very, very similarly. Now, moving away from the thugs and getting into more of what else you'll be doing in the game, there are a bunch of side missions, as discussed, that will see you take down certain bases, performing science tasks, finding collectibles, and just genuinely being a friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. The Kraven bases and hideouts felt entirely unoriginal, and they were just kind of like a copy-paste from the Sable or Fisk territories from the first game. The crimes around the city can be done much faster, which makes them more efficient, so it gets you back on your path and back into the action while still picking up your assortment of tokens and XP. But where the game really improved with this is its science side. Science missions are now a lot more varied, and they range from you riding a bike, shooting down wasps, splicing DNA, controlling spider bots, the list goes on. The splicing sequences are kind of a reskin of what they were in the first game, but these sequences can be skipped from day one, which is great, and they're all relatively easy to complete, so you don't feel like they slow down the game's momentum too much. Now, some of the side missions too, man, oh my god, almost got me in tears. It's ridiculous. Now, doing these side missions and quests around the city will unlock a variety of different currencies and points that go into upgrading your gadgets, your skills, and also into what a lot of people look forward to in these games, the suits. So let's talk about the suits. Now there are around 64 different suits in the game, more if you pre-ordered, and even more if you're counting the different color variations. Now for the most part, there are some absolute banger suits in here, and I'm happy to report that the Amazing Spider-Man 2 suit is finally in a game. What I'm not really happy about is that there are around 8 to 9 slots from memory on Peter's side that are dedicated to Tom Holland's movie suits. These suits really aren't that impressive, especially compared to all of these suits that were left on the cutting room floor. You're telling me that we needed 8 to 9 different Tom Holland suits over these? Come on, man, they're not that good. And to add insult to injury, the final suit that you get for Peter for reaching max level, the congratulations from the game for you achieving the final highest level, is fucking Tom Holland's inside out spider suit. What were they thinking? That suit is dog shit, number one. And two, why is that the highest max level suit as a reward? Oh my god. Alright, let's now move into bugs and the performances. The game has a couple of game modes, which is Fidelity and Performance mode. Fidelity drops the frame rates down to 30 but has a focus on the image quality and resolution, whereas the Performance mode has a few trade-offs to hit a stable 60. I went with Performance because the game looks fantastic anyways, and those trade-offs weren't that much of a compromise when I saw those smooth 60 frames. Now in terms of bugs, this game doesn't really have too many game-breaking bugs, but there actually were a lot more than I had anticipated that came up. So just a few, Miles was floating in midair, there was some kind of collision bug there. Another time I was in a Kraven base and I wanted to get another look at the Scorpio suit, thinking it might have been a Green Goblin suit or something like that. And then I soft locked myself out. It wouldn't let me go back into this hole in the wall, so I had to restart. The game starts spazzing out here for no reason near Big Wheel. When I was in the Noir suit, I had lower frame rates, obviously coming from the Into the Spider-Verse movie. The game changed me back into the black suit but kept me at the lower frame rate. When I was doing the side mission as a Spider-Bot, I was unable to control the Spider-Bot all of a sudden, and it just kept slowly moving me up this hill. I could not control or do anything. When I had a fight with Wraith, she decided to become a frog for some reason. And a lot of people are getting this cube suit bug that turns you into a white cube. Again, it's nothing game breaking and nothing that a quick reload to checkpoint can't resolve, but it was a little bit daunting to me that I was getting so many of these bugs within the first weekend of this game coming out. So my final thoughts. God, this video is long. As you can see, this is a really great game, for sure, but there are so many points in this game that make me wonder why the developers made certain decisions. Why bring in 2 Spider-Man villains, but only give them about 30 to 40 minutes of cutscene or on-screen time each? Why did you give most of the villains a seemingly unlimited number of themed thugs? Why did you rush elements, and why does Peter get 8 slots of Tom Holland suits when there are so many better, more interesting suits that could have been used? And why are the prominent villains from past games killed off screen? The game vastly improves on what came before it, to be sure, and it really is more of what I like and less of what I didn't like from the previous 2 games, which is fantastic. But this is not a perfect game, at least not for me. My hopes and wishes for Spider-Man 3 is that they include a choice mechanic that really fleshes out everything and gives us some kind of replayability, especially if they're going to be keeping this game's length. I really want them to flesh out their villains and letting the player really marinate in the certain events before moving us along. If you're going to take creative liberties, make sure it's for a reason that serves the character or story, rather than just use them as a tool to push another character over the line. There is so much I love about this game, and when it's at its height, it soars, but there are smaller issues that ate away at me during my play and dampened my overall experience. But guys, let me know your thoughts about the game in the comments down below. Do you think this was the best game ever and that my opinions are cooked, or do you agree with some or all of my points of view? Let me know your thoughts. I really did have high hopes for the game, and they met those hopes on many occasions. But there were just so many things that brought down that whole experience for me. I want to thank the coffee supporters on the screen right now. And if you do want to become a coffee supporter, go ahead, click the link in the description. It helps me out and you get access to these videos early. Take care and stay safe out there, guys, and I'll catch you in the next one.